The desperate call the story begins in the year 2387 aboard the massive alien research vessel Harmony of Stars. The ship belongs to the Vellani Empire, a peaceful race of tall, blue-skinned beings who have spent centuries studying and cataloging different species across the galaxy. Their society values knowledge, cooperation, and peaceful resolution above all else. Captain Thale stands on the bridge of his ship, watching the holographic displays with growing concern. His crew of scientists and explorers had been investigating reports of a new threat in the Outer Rim territories. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. The threat comes from a species called the Korain, massive, insectoid creatures that consume entire worlds. They strip planets bare of all life, leaving nothing but dead rock behind. The Koran travel in vast swarms, their biomechanical ships capable of tearing through even the strongest defenses. The Vellani had first encountered the Koran 3 months ago. Several outer colonies had simply vanished, their distress signals cut short. When scout ships investigated, they found worlds stripped clean, their atmospheres poisoned, their surfaces cracked and bleeding molten rock. Now the Koran swarm was moving toward the core worlds of the Vellani Empire. Military analysts estimated they had perhaps 6 months before the first major population centers would be under attack. The Vellani fleet, designed for exploration and peaceful missions, was no match for the Koran's bioweapons. Captain Thale had been tasked with a desperate mission. The Vellani High Council had decided to reach out to other species for help. They had sent messages to every known civilization, begging for military assistance. Most had refused, too afraid of the Koran to risk their own forces. But there was one species that had not yet been contacted. The humans of Earth were relatively new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most other races considered them primitive and aggressive. The Vellani had avoided contact with humanity, viewing them as too violent and unpredictable. Now, with no other options, Captain Thale prepared to make the journey to Earth. His ship carried detailed records of the Koran attacks, hoping to convince the humans to help. The captain knew it was a long shot. Why would a young species risk everything to help strangers? The journey to Earth took 2 weeks. During that time, Thale studied every piece of information about humanity that the Vellani had collected. The reports painted a picture of a species that seemed almost designed for war. Humans had spent most of their history fighting each other, developing increasingly deadly weapons and tactics. What disturbed Thale most was how humans seemed to enjoy conflict. Their entertainment was filled with stories of war and violence. Their sports were physical contests that would horrify most civilized species. Even their children played games that involved mock combat. Yet there were also reports of human compassion. Stories of humans risking their lives to save strangers, of their willingness to help those in need. It was this contradiction that gave Thale hope. When the Harmony of Stars finally reached Earth's solar system, Thale was amazed by what he saw. The humans had transformed their entire star system into a fortress. Massive space stations orbited every planet, bristling with weapons. That made Thale's skin crawl. Automated defense platforms hung in the void like deadly flowers, their sensors tracking his ship's every movement. The human response to his arrival was swift and professional. Within minutes, a squadron of sleek warships had surrounded his vessel. The ships were small compared to the Harmony of Stars, but they radiated a sense of deadly purpose that made Thale's crew nervous. The humans granted permission for Thale to approach Earth, but only after extensive scans and security checks. As his ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Thale was struck by the planet's beauty. Blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds created a stunning mosaic of life. But beneath that beauty, Thale could see the signs of a warrior species. Cities were built like fortresses with multiple levels of defense. Even civilian buildings seemed designed to withstand attack. The humans had turned their entire world into a military base. The story's first part ends as Captain Thal's ship lands at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters. As he prepares to make his desperate plea for help, Thal wonders if he has made a terrible mistake. The humans might help them defeat the Corrin, but what would happen when the war was over? Would humanity prove to be an even greater threat than the monsters they sought to destroy? The stage is set for a tale that will explore both the noble and terrifying aspects of human nature, as seen through alien eyes. The meeting takes place in a massive conference room, deep within the Earth Defense Force headquarters. Captain Thal finds himself seated across from General Marcus Stone, the head of human military operations. The general is a tall, gray-haired man with cold blue eyes that seem to see right through Thal's polite, diplomatic exterior. Thal begins his presentation with holographic displays showing the Corrin attacks. The images are horrifying. Entire cities consumed by swarms of insectoid creatures, planets stripped bare of life, millions of beings killed in ways too terrible to describe. The Vellani captain explains how his people have tried to fight back, but their peaceful nature has left them unprepared for such savage warfare. General Stone listens in silence, his expression never changing. When Thal finishes his plea for help, the room falls quiet. The general studies the data for several long minutes, occasionally asking technical questions about Corrin weapons and tactics. Finally, Stone speaks. His voice is calm, almost casual, as he discusses the logistics of fighting an intergalactic war. He talks about supply lines, troop movements, and weapon effectiveness with the same tone others might use to discuss the weather. Thal realizes that this human has spent his entire life preparing for exactly this type of conflict. The general explains that humanity has been aware of the Corrin threat for some time. Human deep space monitoring stations had detected the swarm's movement toward Vellani space months ago. The humans had been watching, waiting to see how other species would respond to the threat. Stone reveals that humanity has been preparing for this moment for decades. Ever since they joined the galactic community, human leaders had studied every known threat, every possible enemy. They had built their entire civilization around the principle that peace could only be maintained through superior firepower. The general activates a holographic display showing human military assets. Thal's eyes widen as he sees the true scope of human preparations. Massive battle fleets hidden in the outer systems, weapons that dwarf anything the Vellani had ever imagined, and soldiers trained from birth to fight in the most extreme conditions. What disturbs Thal most is the human attitude toward the coming war. Where the Vellani see horror and tragedy, the humans see opportunity. They speak of the Corrin as a problem to be solved, an enemy to be defeated. There is no fear in their voices, only cold calculation. General Stone explains that humanity will help the Vellani, but there will be conditions. The humans will take complete control of the war effort. All alien forces will follow human command structures. Any species that joins the fight must accept human leadership without question. Thal wants to protest, but he knows his people have no choice. The Corrin are only 4 months away from the first major Vellani worlds. Without human help, his species will be extinct within a year. The general calls in his staff to begin immediate preparations. Thal watches in amazement as the human military machine springs into action. Orders are issued, ships are mobilized, and resources are allocated with terrifying efficiency. Within hours, the first human battle fleets are already heading toward Vellani space dot as Thal prepares to return to his ship. General Stone takes him aside for a private conversation. The general's cold demeanor softens slightly as he explains something that chills. Thal to his core. Stone reveals that humanity has been expecting this moment for generations. Human philosophers and strategists had long predicted that their species would eventually face a choice between peaceful coexistence and survival. The Corran threat represents the choice made manifest. The general explains that humans are naturally violent, but they are naturally protective. When faced with threats to innocent life, humans become something else entirely. They transform. From peaceful beings into weapons of war, more terrible than any alien species has ever imagined. Stone warns Thale that what he is about to witness will change how the Vellani view humanity forever. The peaceful, curious species that had cautiously joined the galactic community will reveal its true nature. The general suggests that after the war, it might be best if humans return to their isolation dot as Thale boards his ship to return to Vellani space. He carries with him the knowledge that he has unleashed something that cannot be controlled. The humans are coming to save his people, but he begins to wonder if the cure might be worse than the disease. The second part ends with human battle fleets already moving toward the war zone, their crews eager for combat. Behind them, Earth's massive industrial complex begins the process of turning the entire human civilization into a weapon capable of destroying the Corran swarm. Asterisk. 3 weeks after Captain Thale's desperate plea, the first human forces arrive in Vellani space. The sight that greets them would have been unimaginable to any peaceful species. The humans have brought not just warships, but an entire mobile civilization designed for one purpose: total war. The human fleet is led by Admiral Sarah Chun, a woman whose reputation for tactical brilliance is matched only by her ruthless efficiency in combat. Her flagship, the Eternal Vigilance, is a massive dreadnought that serves as both command center and weapons platform. The ship bristles with weapons that can crack planets and shields that can withstand the fury of dying stars. The Vellani military commanders gather aboard the Eternal Vigilance for their first strategy meeting. Captain Thale serves as liaison, still struggling to understand what his people have gotten themselves into. The meeting room is stark and functional, with holographic displays showing the advancing Corran swarm. Admiral Chun begins the briefing with a level of detail that shocks the Vellani officers. The humans have not just studied the Corran attacks, they have analyzed every aspect of Corran biology, technology, and tactics. They have identified weaknesses that the Vellani never knew existed. The Admiral explains that the Corran are not as invincible as they appear. Their biomechanical ships are vulnerable to certain types of electromagnetic pulses. Their swarm intelligence has predictable patterns that can be exploited. Most importantly, their rapid reproduction cycle requires specific environmental conditions that can be disrupted. But what disturbs the Vellani most is not the human knowledge of their enemy, but their attitude toward the coming battle. The humans speak of the Corran with the same clinical detachment they might use to discuss a disease outbreak. They are not afraid, not angry, simply focused on the task of extermination. Admiral Chun reveals the human battle plan, and it is unlike anything the Vellani have ever conceived. Instead of trying to defend their worlds, the humans intend to take the fight directly to the Corran. They will use hit-and-run tactics to disrupt the swarm's advance, then lead them into carefully prepared traps. The human strategy involves sacrificing entire star systems to achieve tactical advantage. They will evacuate populations, then turn planets into weapons. Some worlds will be rigged with antimatter charges. Others will be seeded with biological weapons designed specifically to kill Corran. The humans have prepared contingencies for every possible scenario. No matter how extreme. As the meeting progresses, Thale begins to understand the true scope of human preparation. This is not just a military response to a crisis, but the culmination of centuries of planning. The humans have been preparing for this type of war since they first learned. They were not alone in the universe. The Admiral introduces the Vellani to Colonel James Morrison, head of the Human Special Forces. Morrison is a compact man with scars covering his arms and face, souvenirs from conflicts the Valani have never heard of. He will be responsible for training Valani soldiers in human combat techniques. Morrison explains that the Valani will need to abandon their peaceful nature if they want to survive. He will teach them to fight like humans, to embrace violence as a tool for protecting the innocent. The process will be painful, both physically and psychologically, but it is necessary. Training begins immediately. Valani soldiers who have never fired a weapon in anger learn to use human firearms, explosives, and combat techniques. They are taught to think like predators, to see the battlefield as a hunting ground where only the strongest survive. Meanwhile, human engineers work with Valani scientists to upgrade alien technology. Peaceful research vessels are converted into warships. Exploration drones become kamikaze weapons. Every aspect of Valani civilization is militarized to serve the war effort. Transformation is not just technological, but cultural. The Valani begin to adopt human military customs and traditions. They learn human war songs, adopt human tactical terminology, and even begin to enjoy the camaraderie of soldiers preparing for battle. As the human fleet moves deeper into Valani. Space. Reports arrive of the first engagements with Corran scouts. The battles are brief but decisive. Human fighters tear through Corran bioships with weapons that seem to violate the laws of physics. The aliens that once seemed invincible die screaming in the void. But with each victory, the humans become more focused, more dangerous. They begin to display a cold efficiency that frightens even their allies. The Valani realize they are watching the emergence of something that has been sleeping within humanity, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The third part ends with the main Corran. Swarm only days away from the first major engagement. The humans have turned the Valani into warriors, but in doing so, they have also shown them a side of sentient nature that the peaceful species never knew existed. Asterisk. The Battle of Kepler's Gate becomes the turning point in the war against the Corran, but not in the way the Valani expected. The massive space battle takes place in the outer rim of the Valani home system, where the human fleet has prepared a trap that will haunt the galaxy for generations. Captain Thale stands on the bridge of his ship, now heavily modified with human weapons and armor. Around him, his crew operates equipment they barely understand, following tactics that go against every instinct their peaceful species has developed over millennia. The transformation of his people has been complete, but the cost is only now becoming clear. The Corran swarm arrives exactly as the humans predicted. Millions of biomechanical ships pour through the star system like a living plague, their insectoid hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. The swarm is vast beyond imagination, stretching across space in formations that would have spelled doom for any conventional fleet. Admiral Chun watches the enemy approach with cold satisfaction. The humans have spent weeks preparing for this moment, and every detail has been calculated with deadly precision. The Corran are walking into a trap that will demonstrate the true horror of human warfare. The battle begins with what appears to be a desperate human retreat. The smaller human ships fall back before the advancing swarm, firing sporadically as they withdraw. The Corran, sensing victory, press their advantage and surge forward into the heart of the system. But the retreat is an illusion. The humans have seeded the entire area with hidden weapons platforms, stealth mines, and autonomous hunter-killer drones. As the Corran advance, they find themselves surrounded by a web of destruction that activates with devastating effect. The first phase of the trap involves biological weapons specifically designed to target Corran physiology. Invisible clouds of engineered viruses spread through the swarm, causing the biomechanical ships to turn on each other. The Corran watch in horror as their own vessels become weapons against their fleet. Captain Thale observes the battle with growing unease. The humans fight with a level of calculated cruelty that chills into his core. They don't just kill their enemies. They make them suffer. The biological weapons cause the Corrin to die slowly, their death screams transmitted across communication channels for maximum psychological impact. The second phase involves the human's most terrifying weapon, their ability to turn anything into a tool of war. Entire asteroids have been converted into kinetic weapons, accelerated to near-light speed and aimed at the heart of the swarm. When they impact, the explosions are visible from neighboring star systems. But it is the third phase that truly demonstrates human ruthlessness. The humans have captured live Corrin specimens and tortured them for information. They have learned how to mimic Corrin communication signals, using them to spread false orders through the swarm. The Corrin find themselves unable to trust their own command structure. As the battle reaches its climax, Admiral Chun reveals the final component of her strategy. The humans have been herding the surviving Corrin toward a predetermined location, a massive gas giant that has been rigged with experimental weapons. When the Corrin fleet clusters around the planet, the humans detonate devices that turn the entire world into a star. The explosion is unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. The artificial star burns for days, consuming everything within a radius of several light years. The Corrin swarm, one of the most feared forces in the galaxy, is completely annihilated in a display of power that shakes the foundations of space itself. But the victory comes at a cost that the Valani had never anticipated. The humans have not just defeated the Corrin, they have made an example of them. The battle is broadcast throughout the galaxy, showing every species what happens to those who threaten human allies. Captain Thale watches the aftermath with growing dread. The humans move through the debris field, systematically hunting down survivors and eliminating them with cold efficiency. There is no mercy, no quarter given. The message is clear. Humanity's enemies will be completely destroyed. The Valani begin to understand what they have unleashed. The humans have not just won a battle. They have demonstrated a capacity for destruction that dwarfs anything the galaxy has seen. Species that once viewed humanity as primitive newcomers now speak of them in whispered, fearful tones. The fourth part ends with the galactic community's reaction to the Battle of Kepler's Gate. Some species praise humanity as saviors, while others begin to view them as a threat greater than the Corrin ever were. The Villani find themselves caught between gratitude and terror, unsure whether they have been saved or conquered. In the aftermath of victory, the humans begin to reveal their true intentions for the galaxy. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler's Gate, the galaxy has become a very different place. The human victory over the Corrin has sent shockwaves through every civilized system, but the aftermath proves to be more terrifying than the original threat. Captain Thale stands in what was once the Valani High Council chambers, now serving as a regional command center for human military operations. The room has been transformed from a place of peaceful deliberation into a stark military facility. Human officers work alongside Villani administrators, but there is no doubt about who holds the real power. The humans have not officially conquered the Villani Empire, but their influence is absolute. They claim to be protecting their allies from future threats, but their protection comes with conditions that amount to occupation. Villani military forces have been integrated into human command structures. Their technology has been seized for analysis and improvement. Their worlds have been fortified according to human specifications. General Stone arrives for a meeting with the remaining Villani leadership. The human officer has changed since the war began. The cold efficiency that once disturbed Thale has evolved into something far more dangerous. Stone now carries himself with the absolute confidence of a conqueror, secure in the knowledge that no force in the galaxy can challenge human supremacy. The general presents the latest phase of human expansion. Under the guise of creating a galactic defense network, the humans are establishing military bases throughout known space. Any species that refuses to join the network faces economic isolation and the threat of being left defenseless against future threats. The Velani leaders protest weakly, but their objections are brushed aside. General Stone explains that the galaxy has entered a new era. The age of peaceful coexistence is over, replaced by a harsh reality where only the strong survive. The humans have proven themselves to be the strongest, and they will use that strength to reshape the galaxy according to their vision. Captain Thale watches his people's reaction with growing despair. The war has changed the Velani as much as it has the humans. The peaceful species that once valued cooperation above all else now argues about military strategy and territorial control. They have learned to think like humans, and in doing so, they have lost something essential about themselves. The human occupation is not cruel in the traditional sense. There are no mass executions or brutal suppressions. Instead, the humans use subtler methods of control. They provide security, technology, and economic benefits to those who comply with their demands. They offer partnership to those who submit, and isolation to those who resist. But beneath the surface of cooperation, resistance movements begin to emerge. Species that once viewed humans as saviors now see them as oppressors. Secret meetings are held in hidden locations, where alien leaders discuss ways to free themselves from human control. The resistance is led by Commander Alex Ross, a former human military officer who has become disillusioned with his species' actions. Ross had fought in the war against the Corran, but he cannot accept what humanity has become in the aftermath of victory. He works with alien freedom fighters to expose the truth about human intentions. Ross reveals that the war against the Corran was not the spontaneous response to a crisis that it appeared to be. The humans had been planning for galactic domination for decades, waiting for the right opportunity to reveal their true nature. The Corran threat provided the perfect excuse to militarize the galaxy and establish human supremacy. The Resistance discovers that the humans have been manipulating events throughout the galaxy for years. They had allowed the Corran to attack other species, gathering intelligence and testing alien military capabilities. The humans had waited until the threat was severe enough to justify their intervention, then used their superior firepower to position themselves as the galaxy's saviors. Captain Thale is approached by the Resistance and asked to help expose the truth about human actions. The request forces him to confront a terrible choice. He can remain loyal to the humans who saved his people, or he can join the fight for galactic freedom. The decision becomes more urgent when reports arrive of human atrocities in distant systems. Species that have resisted human control are being systematically eliminated. The humans claim these actions are necessary to prevent the emergence of new threats, but the evidence suggests a deliberate campaign of genocide. The fifth part ends with Captain Thale making his choice. He decides to join the Resistance, knowing that his actions will likely result in his death. But he realizes that some things are worth dying for, and the freedom of the galaxy is one of them. The stage is set for a final confrontation between the human empire and the forces of galactic freedom, with the fate of countless species hanging in the balance. The final confrontation begins not with a massive battle, but with a single act of defiance that changes everything. Captain Thale, now secretly working with the Resistance, broadcasts a message throughout the galaxy revealing the truth about human intentions. The transmission includes evidence of human atrocities, secret documents outlining plans for galactic domination, and testimony from species that have been systematically oppressed. The revelation sends shockwaves through the galaxy. Species that had willingly joined the human-led defense network suddenly understand that they have traded their freedom for security. The careful facade of cooperation that the humans had maintained for months begins to crumble. General Stone's response is swift and merciless. He declares Captain Thale and the Resistance to be terrorists threatening galactic peace. Human forces begin a systematic hunt for Resistance members, using the same ruthless efficiency they once employed against the Corin, the galaxy watches. In horror, as humanity's true, nature is finally revealed, but the Resistance has one advantage that the humans had not anticipated. Commander Ross, the former human officer, understands his species' tactics and weaknesses. He has been studying human military doctrine for years, looking for ways to defeat the seemingly invincible war machine that his people have become. Ross reveals that humanity's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. The humans have become so focused on military dominance that they have forgotten the importance of winning hearts and minds. Their brutal suppression of the Resistance only creates more enemies, turning neutral species against them. The Resistance launches a campaign of guerrilla warfare that stretches human forces across the galaxy. They use hit-and-run tactics, sabotage, and psychological warfare to disrupt human operations. More importantly, they begin to unite the galaxy's diverse species under a common cause: freedom from human oppression. The war that follows is unlike anything the galaxy has seen. The humans possess superior technology and military training, but they are vastly outnumbered by the combined forces of the Resistance. The conflict becomes a battle of attrition, with both sides suffering massive casualties. As the war progresses, the true cost of human actions becomes clear. The species that had once viewed humanity as saviors now see them as monsters. The peaceful galactic community that had existed for centuries has been shattered, replaced by a militarized society where fear and violence are the norm. Captain Thale finds himself leading a joint task force of alien species united only by their desire to free themselves from human control. The irony is not lost on him that he is now fighting the very people who had saved his species from extinction. But he realizes that salvation without freedom is just another form of slavery. The climax of the story comes when the Resistance discovers the location of Earth itself. The human homeworld has been heavily fortified, surrounded by weapons platforms and defense systems that make it nearly impregnable. But Ross knows of a weakness in the defenses, a flaw that could be exploited by a small, determined force. The mission to Earth becomes a suicide run led by Captain Thale and a handful of volunteers from different species. They manage to penetrate the planet's defenses and reach the human capital, where they confront the leaders of the human empire. The confrontation reveals the final truth about humanity. The human leaders are not evil monsters, but ordinary people who genuinely believe they are protecting the galaxy. They see their actions as necessary sacrifices for the greater good. In their minds, they are still the heroes of the story. This revelation is perhaps the most disturbing of all. The humans have not been corrupted by power or driven mad by war. They are simply acting according to their nature, doing what they believe is right. The terrifying side of humanity is not an aberration, but an integral part of who they are. Asterisk. The story ends with a Pyrrhic victory for the Resistance. They succeed in exposing the human empire's crimes to the galaxy, but at enormous cost. Countless species have been destroyed or enslaved, and the galaxy will never return to its former peaceful state. Captain Thale survives the final battle, but he is a changed being. He has seen the best and worst of humanity, and he understands that both aspects exist within every sentient species. The capacity for both great good and great evil lies dormant in all civilized beings, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. The final scene shows the galaxy beginning to rebuild, but under very different circumstances. The various species have learned that peace cannot be taken for granted, that freedom must be constantly defended. They have also learned that sometimes the greatest threats come not from obvious enemies, but from those who claim to be protectors. The story concludes with the sobering realization that the galaxy will never again be as innocent as it was before. Humanity revealed its true nature. The age of peaceful coexistence is over, replaced by a harsh new reality where every species must be prepared to defend itself against threats both external and internal. The end asterisk.